Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Cheryl Yuen. Here's a look at our top stories tonight. A U.S. Air Force guardsman is arrested on suspicion of leaking top-secret defense documents. Locally, Xia Baolong meets a cross-section of Hong Kong society on the second day of his visit. And Asia's gaming industry is set to be more competitive as Japan gets the nod for its first casino. A computer specialist from the U.S. Air National Guard has been arrested on suspicion of leaking classified documents on defense. The Pentagon is now facing questions about how a low-ranking staffer could access such information. Raymond Yang reports.
Local TV stations hired helicopters to capture the dramatic moment when Jack Teixeira was arrested outside his home in rural Massachusetts. Clad in body armor and wielding rifles, FBI agents ordered the 21-year-old to turn himself in by treading backwards, with his hands behind his head. Teixeira seemed to cooperate. His arrest ended days of a manhunt for the perpetrator of what is dubbed the biggest intelligence leak in a decade. Teixeira worked at a military base as a member of the Air National Guard. As a cyber transport systems journeyman, he managed and troubleshot computers and communications systems. Media outlets suggested Teixeira began publishing classified information early last year in online chat rooms to impress his fellow video gamers. The latest batch of leaked Pentagon documents offered a glimpse into Washington's assessment of the war in Ukraine, as well as secrets about its allies. Already struggling to contain the fallout, U.S. officials now have to explain how junior military staffers were given top security clearance to classified documents.
This was a deliberate criminal act to violate those guidelines and rules, in the same way that if you locked your front door and somebody came into your house and took something, you followed your procedures and you locked your door, but somebody went in your house and took something and put it out on the street. That's what we're talking about here.
Attorney General Merrick Garland confirmed that Teixeira has been arrested under the Espionage Act. Notable whistleblowers charged under the federal law included Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. Raymond Yang, HKIBC.
North Korea says it has improved its defense after testing a solid-fuel rocket. Video provided by state media showed the launch of the solid-fuel Hwasong-18, which is an intercontinental ballistic missile. Pyongyang says a solid-fuel missile enables it to deploy rockets faster. Ballistic missiles using liquid fuel have to be loaded with the propellant at the launch site, a process which takes time. North Korea says the test yesterday was successful and increased its ability to carry out a nuclear counterattack. Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has been given a ceremonial welcome in Beijing. President Xi Jinping received Lula at the East Gate of the Great Hall of the People. They inspected a guard of honor ahead of their talks. The war in Ukraine was expected to dominate their discussions, as both aim to resolve the conflict through negotiations. Brazil is China's biggest trading partner in Latin America, and both countries are expected to sign several agreements to strengthen ties. Locally, it was another busy day for the visiting director of the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office. Xia Baolong met residents, lawyers, and Hong Kong members of China's legislature. Janice Low reports.
Security was tighter than usual at this restaurant in Kowloon Bay, and those going for yum cha had to register on arrival. That was because Xia Baolong, Beijing's top man on Hong Kong affairs, dropped in for breakfast with locals. The director of the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office was accompanied by Chief Executive John Lee and Liaison Office Director Zheng Yanxiong. Youth Minister Alice Mack was among those breakfasting with the officials. Other customers were barred from entering until the officials left an hour later. This customer, who was inside, was overwhelmed, saying her family did not expect to meet Xia. The next stop was a 30-minute visit to the Shamshui-Po District Health Center in Checkmate. Xia made no comment when asked about his impression of Hong Kong citizens. The group then headed to a nearby community center for the elderly and spoke to volunteers. This volunteer said Xia praised them for the good work. Although I'm older than Xia by over 10 years, he called me auntie, she said. After visiting the Federation of Trade Unions office in To Kwa Wan, Xia went to the Court of Final Appeal, where he was welcomed by Chief Justice Andrew Cheung and Secretary for Justice Paul Lam. After 2 hours at the top court, the mainland official met representatives from the Law Society. Xia wrapped up his second day in the city by meeting Hong Kong members of the National People's Congress and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference at the Liaison Office. Janice Low, HKIBC.
A taxi driver has been arrested on suspicion of selling fake smartphones to his passengers. Police also seized another 9 counterfeit phones from his Yuen Long home. The 60-year-old driver allegedly sold the gadgets at a low price of between $1,500 and $2,000. 3 passengers approached police after finding that the phones they bought in recent weeks were fakes. The government says it will not extend a cash allowance for people waiting for public housing to those who are on the list for less than 3 years. The housing chief warned of the financial implications if more people get the subsidy. Housing for the less well-off members of society was the focus of today's Finance Committee meeting. Unionist lawmaker Xiao touched on the cash allowance granted to families who have been waiting for public housing for more than 3 years. He suggested that those who have been waiting for more than 1 year should also be subsidized, as they have to pay high rents. But Housing Secretary Winnie Ho was adamant.
3 years is a reasonable time frame. We want to help those who are still on the waiting list after 3 years. We have no plans to lower the threshold to less than 3 years because this is linked to the 3-year goal. Relaxing that threshold will also mean financial implications.
Roundtable legislator Michael Tien said the Housing Bureau has given inconsistent replies about the reusable value of light public housing units after they are demolished. It had earlier claimed that 60% of the construction materials can be reused, but then said it was too early to be accurate. Ho said 60% was an estimate, and the actual figure depends on the design and construction expenses. A clearer picture could emerge when the tender contract is confirmed in July. A suspected drug trafficker has been captured 4 days after escaping from West Kowloon Magistracy by swapping identification wristbands with another detainee. Chen Shu-hua was arrested in Yau Ma Tei last night. The 37-year-old was denied bail again after being accused of fleeing from lawful custody and misleading police. Lam King-ho, who allegedly helped Chen escape by exchanging tags, was remanded in custody for misleading police. He had originally been granted bail for a domestic violence charge. Hong Kong welcomed nearly 2.5 million visitors last month, a 68% jump from February. 8 out of 10 inbound travelers in March were from the mainland. The increase will likely extend the strong momentum of a retail sector rebound, with sales jumping 31% in February. For the first 3 months of the year, the SAR received 4.4 million visitors, roughly 35% of pre-COVID levels. Overseas, Christian leaders in Jerusalem say religious intolerance has risen under the most right-wing government in Israel.
We do see an increase of attacks. Not only an increase in number, but also the way the attacks are done. They're done often in broad daylight, going into churches. You know, there's no shame or even hesitation at times when it comes to these types of attacks. With this new Israeli government, there's a new sort of an environment that is created, or it creates an environment where intolerance is accepted, whether that be towards Palestinians, towards Muslims, or towards Christians.
Christians have accused the authorities of not protecting their sacred sites from extremist Jewish settlers. Muslims are also angry after Israeli police raided the Al-Aqsa Mosque twice last week and arrested hundreds of worshippers. More than 380,000 people across France took to the streets on the eve of a ruling by the Constitutional Council on the government's unpopular decision to raise the retirement age. The biggest rally was in Paris, where protesters clashed with police who fired tear gas. Over 40,000 demonstrators denounced President Emmanuel Macron, who bypassed parliament and used special powers to make people work 2 more years before they qualify for pensions. Protesters stormed the headquarters of luxury brand LVMH, demanding that corporations pay more taxes to fund the social security system. In the northwestern city of Rennes, cars and rubbish bins were set alight as tensions remained high ahead of tonight's meeting of the Constitutional Council. Japan has given the green light for the country's first casino. The mega resort in the city of Osaka is slated for completion in 2029. Chloe Feng reports.
Aiming to tap into a new source of revenue, Japan's government has approved a proposal to build the country's first casino. A massive resort costing $3.5 billion is set to open in 2029 on Yumeshima, a reclaimed island in Osaka Bay. The complex will include hotels, a conference center, shopping mall, museum, and ferry terminal. U.S. casino operator MGM Resorts International and local partner RX Corp are spearheading the project, with each owning a 40% stake. The resort is targeting revenue of $4 billion annually, mainly from gaming. It hopes to attract 6 million international tourists and 14 million domestic visitors. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said the project will help the country's economy, although opponents warned that it could lead to gambling addiction and exploitation by crime syndicates. A casino in Japan could make Asia's gaming market more competitive. But Wilfred Wong, president of Sands China, dismissed concerns that Macau could be affected. He said the gambling hub has a spate of resorts for visitors to choose. This, along with its proximity to mainland China, will ensure Macau's competitiveness, he said. Wang added that Macau's resorts are investing billions of dollars in the coming years, long before the Japanese casino opens for business. Chloe Feng, HKIBC.
Now let's take a look at the markets. The Hang Seng Index closed up 94 points. Top 10 active stocks. Tencent gained $2.20. Meituan lost $1.40. Alibaba gained 35 cents. JD.com lost $2.20. Onto the weather now. Mainly cloudy tomorrow, becoming hot in the afternoon. Temperatures will range between 23 and 29 degrees. It will remain hot in the following days. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Friday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Cheryl Yuen. Good night.